October 15th, 1994. 2:47 p.m. The autumn leaves were falling like teardrops across Hyde Park, creating a carpet of gold and crimson beneath Princess Diana's feet. She walked alone along the serpentine path, her blonde hair catching the pale afternoon sunlight that filtered through the nearly bare branches above. To anyone watching from a distance, she appeared to be simply another woman taking a peaceful Sunday stroll. But Diana was running away. 2 hours earlier, she had left Kensington Palace after another devastating argument with Charles. Their marriage had become a battlefield of cold silences and cutting words, and that afternoon's confrontation about the boys' Christmas arrangements had left her feeling more isolated than ever. The palace walls that should have protected her felt like a prison, and she needed to escape somewhere she could breathe freely, somewhere she could simply be Diana instead of Her Royal Highness. Hyde Park had become her sanctuary over the years. Here, without the full royal entourage, with just a single protection officer trailing discreetly behind, she could pretend for a few precious hours that she was a normal woman dealing with normal problems. Not the Princess of Wales, whose every gesture was scrutinized, whose every emotion was dissected by the press, whose marriage was falling apart under the weight of public expectation. Diana pulled her navy wool coat tighter against the October chill and quickened her pace. The park was quieter than usual for a Sunday afternoon. Most families had retreated indoors as the weather turned crisp, leaving behind scattered joggers, dog walkers, and the occasional tourist still determined to capture the perfect autumn photograph. She had been walking for nearly 20 minutes, her mind replaying the harsh words Charles had spoken, when she heard something that made her stop abruptly. Through the rustle of falling leaves and the distant hum of London traffic, there was another sound, soft, rhythmic, heartbreaking. Someone was crying. Diana paused on the path, listening intently. The sound was coming from somewhere near the Diana Memorial Bridge, the very bridge that would one day bear her name, though she couldn't have known that then. Following the sound, she veered off the main path and found herself walking toward a small bench, partially hidden behind a cluster of oak trees. That's when she saw her. A little girl, no more than 4 years old, sat curled up on the bench with her knees drawn to her chest, sobbing with the kind of desperation that only comes from being completely lost and completely afraid. She was wearing a pale pink coat that had seen better days, small brown boots that were scuffed and dirty, and a knitted hat with a pom-pom that had come partially undone. Her dark hair fell in tangled curls around her tear-streaked face. Diana's maternal instincts kicked in immediately, overriding years of royal training that dictated caution and protocol in unexpected situations. She approached the bench slowly, her heart breaking at the sight of this tiny, abandoned figure. "Hello, sweetheart," Diana said softly, her voice gentle and warm. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" The little girl looked up, her brown eyes wide and swimming with tears. She studied Diana's face for a moment, taking in the kind blue eyes and gentle smile. There was no recognition there, no awareness that she was speaking to one of the most famous women in the world. To her, Diana was simply a nice lady who had stopped to help. "I can't find my mummy," the child whispered, her voice so small it was barely audible. "She was here and then she was gone, and I looked everywhere, but I can't find her." Diana felt something crack inside her chest. She looked around quickly, scanning the nearby area for any sign of frantic parents searching for their child. The park was nearly empty in this secluded section, with no one else in sight. "Oh, darling," Diana said, her voice thick with emotion. "How frightening that must be. What's your name?" "Sophie," the little girl replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Sophie Elizabeth Miller. My mummy said I should always tell people my whole name if I get lost." "That's very smart of your mummy, Sophie Elizabeth Miller. What a beautiful name. I'm Diana." She deliberately left off her title, instinctively understanding that this child needed comfort, not ceremony. Diana glanced back toward the path where her protection officer, Detective Inspector Ken Worf, was maintaining a discreet distance. She could see him speaking quietly into his radio, no doubt already initiating protocol for this unexpected situation. But something in Diana's expression made him pause. He knew that look. It was the same expression she wore when visiting sick children in hospitals, when protocol gave way to pure maternal instinct. "Sophie," Diana continued, settling onto the bench beside the little girl, Can you tell me what happened? When did you last see your mummy? Sophie's lower lip trembled as she tried to organize her thoughts. We were feeding the ducks by the water. There were lots of ducks and they were so hungry and Mummy gave me bread to throw. But then there was a big dog and it jumped on me and I got scared and ran. When I stopped running, Mummy was gone. Diana's heart ached for this frightened child. She could imagine the scene perfectly. A routine family outing turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Somewhere in the park, Sophie's mother was probably beside herself with panic, searching frantically and calling her daughter's name. How long ago was that, do you think? Diana asked gently. Sophie considered this with the serious concentration that only young children bring to impossible questions. I don't know. A very long time. Maybe 100 minutes. Despite her concern, Diana smiled slightly at this response. I think it probably feels like 100 minutes when you're scared, doesn't it? But I bet it hasn't been quite that long. Sophie nodded solemnly and then asked the question that would pierce straight through Diana's carefully constructed composure. Are you sad too? Diana blinked in surprise. What makes you think I'm sad, sweetheart? Your eyes, Sophie said with the startling directness of childhood. They look like my mummy's eyes when she thinks I'm not watching. Sad eyes that are trying to smile. The observation hit Diana like a physical blow. Here was this lost, frightened child who had somehow seen through the mask that Diana wore so expertly. The performance that fooled photographers and politicians and palace staff. A 4-year-old girl had looked at her face and seen the loneliness that Diana thought she had hidden so well. Sometimes, Diana admitted quietly, surprising herself with her honesty. Sometimes I do feel sad. Why? Sophie asked with the innocent curiosity of someone too young to understand that adults weren't supposed to have problems. Diana was quiet for a long moment, looking out across the park where other people's lives continued in their normal patterns. How could she explain to a 4-year-old that she felt trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within? How could she tell this child that she understood what it felt like to be lost, even when you were surrounded by people who were supposed to love and protect you? Well, Diana said carefully, sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to fix. Just like sometimes children get lost in parks, sometimes adults get lost in their lives. Sophie considered this with surprising seriousness. But you're not lost now, she pointed out. You found me. The simple logic was devastating in its accuracy. Diana felt tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. You're absolutely right, Sophie. I found you, and now we're going to find your mummy together. But as Diana reached for her phone to call for assistance, Sophie suddenly grabbed her hand. Her small fingers were cold and slightly sticky, the way children's hands always seem to be. But they held on to Diana with surprising strength. Please don't leave me, Sophie whispered, fresh tears starting to fall. Everyone always leaves. Diana's heart shattered completely. She set her phone aside and gathered Sophie into her arms, feeling the little girl's body trembling against her chest. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart, I promise. We'll stay right here together until we find your mummy. Really? Sophie asked, her voice muffled against Diana's coat. Really, really, Diana confirmed, using the phrase that William and Harry always demanded when they needed absolute reassurance. And so Diana made a decision that would have horrified her security team and caused panic among palace officials if they had known. Instead of immediately calling for backup, instead of following protocol that dictated removing herself from unpredictable public situations, she chose to simply be present with this child who needed her. They sat together on that bench while the afternoon light slowly faded around them. Diana told Sophie about the ducks that lived in the park, about the swans that were owned by the queen, about the secret gardens where the park keepers grew special flowers. Sophie, in return, told Diana about her cat named Whiskers, about her favorite bedtime story, about how her daddy lived in a different house now, but still loved her very much. My mummy cries sometimes too, Sophie confided after they had been talking for nearly an hour. Especially after Daddy moved to his new house. She thinks I don't see, but I do. Diana felt a familiar pang of recognition. That must be very hard for you to see. I try to make her happy, Sophie continued. I draw her pictures and I help with the washing up, and I don't ask for sweets when we go to the shops, but sometimes she still cries. Diana understood exactly what Sophie was describing. The desperate desire to fix the sadness of someone you loved. the crushing responsibility that children sometimes took on themselves to heal the wounds of the adults around them. It was a feeling Diana knew intimately from her own childhood, when her parents' marriage had crumbled, and she had tried so hard to be good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough to make them stay together. "Sophie," Diana said gently, tilting the little girl's chin up so they were looking directly at each other. "It's not your job to make your mummy stop being sad. Sometimes grown-ups are sad about things that have nothing to do with children. That doesn't mean you're not wonderful and loved and important." Sophie studied Diana's face with those penetrating brown eyes. "Is it someone's job to make you stop being sad?" The question caught Diana completely off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. In her world, her feelings were either ignored, criticized, or treated as problems to be managed. The idea that someone might take responsibility for her emotional well-being, that her sadness might matter enough for someone to address, was so foreign that she didn't know how to respond. "I don't know," Diana answered honestly. "I've never really thought about that." "Well," Sophie said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood, "I think everyone needs someone to help them when they're sad. Even grown-ups. Even pretty ladies like you." As if summoned by Sophie's words, they heard voices calling in the distance. "Sophie! Sophie Elizabeth!" The voice was female, desperate, getting closer. Sophie's head shot up, her entire body suddenly alert. "That's my mummy." Diana felt a bittersweet mixture of relief and loss. She was genuinely happy that Sophie would be reunited with her mother, but she also realized that their extraordinary afternoon was about to end. This little girl had given her something she hadn't even known she needed: the simple comfort of being seen and accepted without judgment. "Mummy, Mummy, I'm here," Sophie called out, scrambling to her feet on the bench. Within moments, a woman appeared on the path, running toward them, with a face streaked with tears and panic. She was probably in her early 30s, with the same dark curls as Sophie, and eyes red-rimmed from crying. Behind her came a park security guard and what appeared to be several volunteers who had been helping with the search. "Sophie!" the woman cried, reaching the bench and sweeping her daughter into her arms with the desperate intensity of a parent who had thought they might never see their child again. "Oh my God, Sophie, I was so scared. I looked everywhere for you. I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but Diana understood. Every parent's worst nightmare had been playing out in this woman's mind for the past several hours. "I'm sorry, Mummy," Sophie said, her small voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "The big dog scared me and I ran and got lost. But the nice lady stayed with me and told me stories and said she wouldn't leave me." That's when Sophie's mother finally seemed to notice Diana sitting quietly on the bench. Her eyes widened with recognition, but before she could speak, Sophie was climbing down from her arms and reaching for Diana's hand. "This is Diana," Sophie announced proudly. "She found me and stayed with me and told me about the Queen's swans. She has sad eyes like you, Mummy, but she's very nice." Sophie's mother looked between her daughter and Princess Diana, clearly struggling to process what had happened. "Your Royal Highness," she began, "I don't know how to thank you. I don't know what to say. When Sophie disappeared, I was so afraid." "Please," Diana said, standing and placing a gentle hand on the woman's arm. "I'm just glad Sophie is safe. She's a remarkable little girl. You should be very proud." "She stayed with me for hours," Sophie told her mother eagerly. "She didn't leave even when I was crying. She promised she wouldn't leave, and she didn't." Diana saw something flicker across the woman's face, a moment of understanding that went beyond gratitude. This stranger, this princess, had given her daughter something invaluable: the security of knowing that she mattered enough for someone to stay. "Thank you," Sophie's mother whispered, and Diana could hear in those simple words all the things that couldn't be said. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for caring. Thank you for treating my daughter like she was worthy of your time and attention." As the small group began to walk back toward the main path, Sophie tugged on Diana's coat. "Diana," she said, her voice serious, "will you remember me?" Diana knelt down to Sophie's eye level one final time. "I will remember you for the rest of my life, Sophie Elizabeth Miller. And I hope you'll remember that you're brave and smart and kind, and that you have the most amazing ability to see people's hearts." Sophie threw her small arms around Diana's neck in a fierce hug. "I think your sad eyes are getting happier," she whispered in Diana's ear. "I'm glad I found you too." As they walked back through the park together, Sophie chattering excitedly about their adventure, while her mother listened with tears of relief streaming down her face, Diana felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt genuinely useful. Not useful because of her title, or her platform, or her ability to bring media attention to important causes, but useful in the most fundamental human way possible. She had been exactly what someone needed, exactly when they needed it. Detective Inspector Worf fell into step beside her as they approached the park entrance, where Sophie's mother had left her car. "That was beautifully done, ma'am," he said quietly. "That little girl will remember this day for the rest of her life." Diana nodded, but she was thinking about Sophie's words. "I think your sad eyes are getting happier." When was the last time someone had cared enough to notice whether her eyes were sad or happy? When was the last time anyone had asked what would make her feel better? At the car, Sophie's mother buckled her daughter into her car seat while thanking Diana repeatedly. Sophie pressed her face against the window and waved enthusiastically as they drove away, her small hand making a star shape against the glass. Diana stood in the parking area long after the car had disappeared, watching the afternoon light fade over Hyde Park. She thought about Sophie's questions, about the unexpected comfort she had found in simply being present with someone who needed her, about the strange healing that had occurred when she stopped performing and started simply existing. For years afterward, Diana would return to that same bench whenever she needed to remember who she was, beneath all the titles and expectations. She would sit there and think about a little girl who had seen her sadness without judgment, who had accepted her help without ceremony, who had reminded her that sometimes the most important thing you can do for another person is simply stay. 3 years later, when Diana died in Paris, Sophie's mother would see the news reports and gather her 7-year-old daughter close. "Do you remember the nice lady in the park who stayed with you when you were lost?" she would ask gently. Sophie, now older but still possessing that remarkable ability to see straight to the heart of things, would nod solemnly. "She had sad eyes," Sophie would remember, "but they got happier when she helped me. I hope someone was helping her when she needed it." The bench where Diana and Sophie had spent that October afternoon still stands in Hyde Park today. Most people walk past it without a second glance, unaware of the extraordinary afternoon that unfolded there in 1994. But sometimes on quiet Sunday afternoons, when the light falls just right through the oak trees, you might see someone sitting there alone, remembering that the most profound moments of connection often happen between strangers who recognize something of themselves in each other. Diana never forgot Sophie Elizabeth Miller, and Sophie never forgot the princess who had sad eyes but stayed anyway, who had problems of her own but made time for a lost little girl, who had shown her that sometimes the best way to stop feeling lost yourself is to help someone else find their way home. In a world that often felt artificial and performative, their afternoon together had been startlingly, beautifully real. Two people who needed exactly what the other could give, meeting by chance on a bench in Hyde Park, sharing the kind of authentic human connection that no amount of protocol or royal training could manufacture. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives come disguised as interruptions, as unexpected detours from our planned paths. Diana had gone to Hyde Park that day seeking solitude and escape. Instead, she had found purpose, connection, in a 4-year-old girl who saw her not as a princess or a symbol, but simply as another person with sad eyes who was trying to find her way through a complicated world. The lost child Diana found in Hyde Park taught her something no royal advisor ever could, that healing often begins when we stop focusing on our own pain long enough to notice someone else's. That afternoon, in choosing to stay with Sophie instead of following protocol, Diana had discovered a piece of herself she thought she had lost forever. The capacity to simply be human, without apology or explanation. The ability to offer comfort without expectation of return. The profound satisfaction that comes from being exactly who someone needs you to be, exactly when they need you to be it. Sophie Elizabeth Miller would grow up to become a child psychologist, specializing in helping children who had experienced loss and displacement. When asked in interviews about what had inspired her career choice, she would sometimes mention a kind woman she had met in a park when she was 4 years old. Someone who had taught her that the most important gift you can give another person is your presence, your attention, and the promise that you won't leave them alone with their fears. Neither Sophie nor Diana could have known that their chance encounter that October afternoon was planting seeds that would continue to bloom for decades to come. In staying with a lost child when she could have simply called for help and walked away, Diana had made a choice that would ripple outward through both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. Sometimes the most important thing we do is the thing that feels like the smallest gesture at the time. A promise to stay, a willingness to sit with someone else's pain. A moment of genuine connection between two people who recognize something essential in each other. In the end, it wasn't Diana's title or her fame or her charity work that mattered most to Sophie. It was the simple fact that when a 4-year-old girl was lost and afraid, a sad-eyed woman in a navy coat had chosen to stay with her until she was safe. In a world that often feels rushed and disconnected, that afternoon reminded both Diana and Sophie that the most radical thing you can do is simply be present for another human being who needs you. The lost child Diana found in Hyde Park was saved, but so was the woman who found her. Sometimes rescue works both ways.